Hi, my name is Andrea. I like to read books, I like to write books, and I like to talk about books. I'm a bit of a mess today because I'm kind of sick, so sorry about that. Today I want to talk about plotting versus pantsing. If you don't know, there are supposedly two types of writers, plotters and pantsers. I say supposedly because you can vary between the two depending on the project, or your method could be kind of a mix of both. I'll get into mixing both a little later. Essentially, plotting is when you plan out your story, characters, and world building details before you actually start writing. You might not know everything, some things will change later on, and new details can emerge, but you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Pantsing, on the other hand, is when you just wing it and write by the seat of your pants. You set pen to paper with very little knowledge of how your story will unfold. It's completely fine to lean either way. Most writers do, that's why these terms exist. But either way, you do have to compromise a little. Let me explain. It ultimately depends on what helps you get your writing going. Some people feel more inspired, or it's easier for them to write when they just sit down and let whatever they're feeling pour through. But some people get stuck if they don't know exactly what they're going to write about. There's no right and wrong way, and there's pros and cons to both. If you don't plot, you can write yourself into a corner or get stuck if you just don't feel inspired to write that day. If you do plot, the process can get predictable and boring. You might have to work a little harder to keep the magic alive. If you completely pantsed a first draft and that helped you get it out, that's great. But if you plan on publishing the story at some point, you're gonna have to give it some structure at some point in the process. Meanwhile, the problem that I face as a plotter is that I never want to stop plotting. It's obsessive. I want to know every single detail about the story before I actually start writing the story. I say stuff like, oh, I can't possibly start until I know every single little thing about this one character. I can't start until I've mapped out all the exposition that I give throughout the entire novel to make sure that I'm spreading it out at a good pace. And it's fine to focus on stuff like that, but one, you can do this stuff while you're writing. There's no reason that all this planning has to go before you ever write a single word. And secondly, you don't need to know every detail in the first or second draft. There's going to be, oh my hair, there's going to be several drafts, and it's fine if you work a few details out in every draft. You don't have to work them all out right at the beginning. So it's perfectly fine to label yourself as either a plotter or a pantser. Most of us are a bit more of one than the other anyway, and there's no wrong approach to starting your story. But every writer at some point in the process is going to have to plan and plot, and they're going to have to take on an attitude of, you know what, fuck it, let's just write, let's just start already. It's perfectly fine to label yourself as either a plotter or a pantser. Most of us are a bit more of one than the other anyway, and there's really no wrong approach to getting your story started. But every writer at some point in the process is going to have to, one, plot, outline, all of that good stuff, add some order to that chaos, and two, take on this pantsing attitude and say, you know what, fuck it, let's just start writing, and relinquish a little bit of that control, at least a little. That's all for today. I hope this video was somewhat helpful or maybe somewhat relatable. I post writing videos on Mondays and bookish videos on Fridays. I'm on Twitter, Goodreads, and on Instagram, where I also talk about books, reading, writing. I'll link to all of those down below. And that's it. Thank you for watching.